When I say the Battle of Berlin, a lot of people envision this photograph. We see a Soviet soldier planting a Soviet flag on top of this building, the Reichstag. It was a symbolic target for the Red Army troops, yet quite peculiar. Since the German parliament that used to be seated in here was dissolved, this here is the story of the battle for the Reichstag. Keep watching. During the Second World War, much of Berlin's pre-war buildings did not survive. The Reichstag, now within it the Bundestag, did survive the countless Allied raids over Berlin, as well as shelling and heavy fighting during the Battle of Berlin. The building is located on the Platz der Republik, which was called Königsplatz before. Until 1884, the Regency Palace was located there. That building was demolished, and 10 years later a new building was constructed. It housed the legislature of the German Empire and subsequent Weimar Republic. After the 1933 Reichstag fire, Hitler issued the Enabling Act, which was a pivotal step in the transition from the democratic Weimar Republic to totalitarianism of Nazi Germany. In 1943, a hospital was housed in the building, and then it was April 1945, and the Soviets stormed the capital of the Third Reich. Towards the end of the month, Red Army units had made much progress in conquering the city. The 150th Rifle Division took the Ministry of the Interior on the southern side of the Motorstrasse with heavy firepower and then hand-to-hand combat with grenades and submachine guns. The Soviet soldiers saw themselves as an elite and wanted to impress the home front, but at the same time individual men didn't want to die in the last moments of the war. Vladimir Borisovich Pereverzev wrote on the 29th of April 1945. Hello, my nearest and dearest ones. So far I am alive and healthy, only I am slightly drunk the whole time. But this is necessary to keep up your courage. Now we're tightening the circle around the center of the city. I am just 500 meters from the Reichstag. To cut a long story short, we'll be in the Reichstag tomorrow. I can't send parcels, i.e. looted goods. There's no time for it. And we front units have other things to do. The soldier was badly wounded shortly after finishing the letter. He died on the day that victory was announced. The Soviet assault on the Reichstag was planned for the early morning of the 30th of April 1945, driven by the urgency to capture it before May Day celebrations in Moscow. Although often attributed to Stalin's pressure, the push for speed mainly came from commanders further down the chain. Once Berlin was fully encircled and Allied interference was no longer a concern, Stalin largely refrained from intervening. Still, the Reichstag remained a powerful symbol of victory and a focal point for Soviet propaganda. As preparations began, even war correspondents were ordered to carry submachine guns, highlighting the intensity of the expected fighting. Soviet troops advanced through heavily contested buildings. From the Ministry of the Interior, a Soviet battalion commander was to lead an assault on the Reichstag and was trying to orient himself. When his regimental commander asked about the delay, the battalion commander shouted, "There's a great building in the way!" The regimental commander grabbed the map from him, looked at it and replied, "That is the Reichstag." The young commander had not been able to imagine that their final objective could be so close. The open ground of the Königsplatz proved deadly. Though only a few hundred meters separated Soviet forces from their objective, the area was filled with craters, debris, and entrenched German defenses. A flooded tunnel added another obstacle. Early assault attempts were met with devastating crossfire from the Reichstag and nearby positions, forcing Soviet troops to retreat with heavy losses. Throughout the day, Soviet forces brought in reinforcements, tanks and artillery. Despite massive bombardments from dozens of heavy guns and rocket launchers, the Reichstag held firm. By afternoon, Soviet troops were pinned down again. by German fire from distant anti-aircraft guns, delaying the final assault until nightfall. Although the building had lost much of its significance during the war, the Soviets saw this building as a historical embodiment of the German state itself. It was where the rise of the Third Reich began, and where its final defeat was to take place. The Nazis on their turn also considered the Reichstag one of the main symbols. Therefore, they intended to defend it to the very end. Heavy artillery continued pounding the Reichstag as Soviet forces prepared a renewed assault. Among the attackers, competition grew intense. Different platoons and banner groups all wanted the honor of being the first to raise the red flag, a symbolic act that promised lasting glory. Some units were carefully selected for political reasons, even including a Georgian soldier as a gesture toward Stalin, while others, especially from certain persecuted ethnic groups, were excluded entirely. Meanwhile, Soviet General Vasily Shatilov had prematurely reported the Reichstag as captured, and the news had already reached Moscow. To make this claim a reality, he ordered his troops to plant the flag on the building at any cost. By early evening, under a sky darkened by smoke, Soviet infantry, supported by tanks, launched a full-scale assault. The Germans had fortified the Reichstag heavily, blocking entrances and defending from above. Soviet troops had to blast their way inside, only to face fierce resistance from defenders using grenades and anti-tank weapons from balconies and upper floors. The fighting was brutal and chaotic, with heavy casualties on both sides. Fire spread quickly through the building, filling its halls with smoke. Amid the chaos, small groups attempted to reach the roof and raise the flag. One early attempt was stopped by machine gun fire, while later claims that the flag was raised before midnight are uncertain and likely influenced by propaganda demands. Despite the symbolic gestures, the battle was far from over. Fighting continued throughout the night, with German forces launching counterattacks from the basement while Soviet troops pushed upward. The combat inside the Reichstag became close quarters and relentless, even involving improvised tactics like dropping grenades through holes in the floor onto enemy positions below, with the battle remaining fierce and chaotic, making the early raising of the Soviet victory flag before midnight on May Day seemed almost meaningless. The fighting was so intense that tragic mistakes occurred. One Soviet soldier tried to throw back a German grenade, but it hit the door frame and exploded at his feet, severing them. Both Soviet and German soldiers continued fighting despite being utterly exhausted and desperate for water. The thick smoke and dust filled their lungs, leaving their throats and noses painfully raw. The violence inside the building only began to subside late in the afternoon. German troops hiding in the basement eventually called out, asking to negotiate with the senior officer. A Soviet lieutenant, disguised as a colonel in sheepskin coat to hide his rank, was sent in to handle the talks. Soon after, German soldiers started emerging from the basement. They were filthy, unshaven and dressed in torn uniforms, glancing around nervously and behaving with subdued submission. Around 300 of them surrendered their weapons, while nearly 200 had already been killed. In a makeshift medical station in the basement, about 500 wounded Germans lay crowded together, many of them injured even before the final assault on the Reichstag began. The Soviets lost 154 killed in action and 312 wounded in action. After the battle, soldiers left their graffiti on the walls of the building. On May 2nd, this photo was taken. Although it appears to show the exact moment Soviet troops captured the Reichstag, the image was actually staged. The photographer, Yevgeny Khalday, arrived in Berlin with a large homemade Soviet flag. By the time he reached the Reichstag, Soviet soldiers had already raised several flags during the chaotic fighting on the 30th of April and the 1st of May. Khalday wanted a powerful, iconic image, so he asked a group of soldiers to reenact the act of raising the flag on the roof. Haldei's version became the definitive image. However, the photo was later altered. In the original image, one of the soldiers helping to raise the flag appeared to be wearing multiple wristwatches, likely taken from looted German property, which was common in the ruins of Berlin. Soviet censors were this suggested looting, so they edited the image to remove one of the watches. They also added extra smoke in the background to make the scene look more dramatic. Another photo, a little lesser known, is this one. It shows a German soldier sitting next to the ruins of the Reichstag. I believe this photo was taken on May 9th. I don't know much about the background of this photo. Obviously, it was a posed photo taken for propaganda purposes by the Soviets. What happened to the soldier in the photo? Do let me know in the comments. If you want to learn about why the Germans fought till the bitter end, click here. Thanks for watching.